All right, let's dive into a concept that is, no joke, the absolute bedrock of the UK Constitution. It's something that shapes every single law, and we're talking about parliamentary sovereignty.
But let's kick things off with a simple but pretty massive question. Just imagine for a second. A government passes a new law and says, that's it. This one's forever. Nobody who comes after us can ever change it. I mean, could they actually do that? That's the big puzzle we're going to get to the bottom of right now.
And to answer that question, we first have to get our heads around Parliament's ultimate superpower, the whole idea of sovereignty.
So, what is it exactly? Well, to put it simply, parliamentary sovereignty means Parliament is the top dog. It is the supreme, #1 source of law in the United Kingdom. And that means no other body, not the courts, not the king, not even a previous government, can tell it what to do. Its power is, well, absolute.
This huge idea really just boils down to two key things. First, Parliament can make or unmake any law it wants. Simple enough. But second, and this is the absolute kicker for our story today, no Parliament can bind a future Parliament. One government just cannot pass a law that the next one is forbidden from changing. And that, well, that creates a really fascinating dynamic.
So what happens when it seems like Parliament kind of forgets that second rule? What happens when two of its own laws smash right into each other? This is where all that theory meets reality in a massive legal paradox.
So let's meet our two contenders. In this corner, we have the Acquisition of Land Act from 1919. It laid out the rules for how people get paid if their land is bought by the government. And crucially, it had some fancy wording in there that basically tried to make its rules permanent. But then, just a few years later, in the other corner, you get the Housing Act of 1925, which comes along and sets out a totally different, conflicting set of rules for the exact same thing.
So you see the problem, right? We've got a legal showdown on our hands. The courts were looking at a direct contradiction. Which law do you follow? The older 1919 Act that tried to lock itself in forever? Or the newer 1925 Act, which was the most recent thing Parliament had to say on the matter?
This exact problem ended up in court back in 1934 in a landmark case called Ellen Street Estates. And this is where that abstract idea of sovereignty was really put to the test. The arguments were pretty straightforward. The property company, Ellen Street Estates, was arguing that the 1919 Act was special, that it couldn't be overridden. The government, on the other hand, just said, look, Parliament is sovereign, it changed its mind in 1925, and the new law is the one that matters.
You can feel the tension, right? The court's decision here was going to be huge. It wasn't just about some land compensation money. It was going to either prop up or totally undermine the entire principle of parliamentary sovereignty.
And the judgment? Oh, it was crystal clear. Lord Justice Maugham delivered this absolute killer line that has been echoing through constitutional law ever since. The legislature cannot bind itself. What he's saying is that according to the UK Constitution, the very idea of one parliament tying the hands of a future one is just impossible.
So, yep, the courts sided with the Minister of Health. They ruled that the newer law, the 1925 Act, was the one that counted. And those conflicting bits from the older 1919 Act, they were basically toast. No longer good law.
Now, this case didn't just solve one little argument. It cemented a vital piece of machinery in how UK law works, a concept called implied repeal. And a really good way to think about it is like a constitutional software update.
So how's the software update work? It's a really simple three-step process. When two laws clash, the courts just have to apply the newer one. That new act is the update, and it automatically, or implicitly, gets rid of the old, outdated bits of the previous law. The new code literally just writes over the old code.
Okay, so a legal battle over land from the 1930s might sound like ancient history, right? But its impact is absolutely fundamental to how the country is run, even today.
And this really gets to the heart of it. The Allen Street case is this massive confirmation of sovereignty. It gives us a clean, practical tool, implied repeal, to sort out messy legal fights. And maybe most importantly, it proves that in the UK's super flexible constitution, no law is untouchable. The will of the Parliament that's sitting right now is what matters most.
But this leaves us with one final and kind of massive thought. This whole system means the law can always change and adapt, which is great. But if no law can ever be made permanent, what does that mean for the laws that protect our most basic, fundamental rights and freedoms? Are they also just one act of Parliament away from being changed or even erased? Now that's something to think about.